Hi everybody, Josh Knight the First here again with another Exade replay coming to you with episode 19 of the series. Let's get right into it. So here we are yet again with another episode where there's no opening sequence. It's being saved for the end of the episode. Like I've been saying, this is what it is now. I really wish they would put it back up. I miss a good opening at the beginning of each episode to set me into the mood, but I'm starting to mind that less and less, and I'll discuss that towards the end of this video, but for right now, that is what it is. This episode, just like the last couple, have been very story-driven, and the thing about it is this episode focuses a lot on growth and evolution of a sort, both on the side of the Bugsters and specifically on Hiiro, who's going to be a lot of the focus of this episode. So since the bad guys in this episode get the least amount of focus, we'll go ahead and start with them. So based off the events of last episode, Kuroto-dan is very upset as to what has happened. As we saw at the end of last episode, he went ahead and let Emu know that he was Patient Zero. He was the progenitor of the Bugster virus, but he's not dead, which very much upsets him. So the thing about it is, he's got this idea of what he's trying to do. He's building towards this game of Kamen Rider Chronicle, and he's trying to program these Gashats, and he has some sort of a plan with the Bugsters involved. We see that he needs 6 more to go. But the interesting thing is, and you'll see this if you look at the screen, why is it that you're so focused on getting your work done but your PC isn't plugged in? If you notice there in the background, in the one scene that we have there with Kuroto-dan at the beginning of the episode, his PC isn't actually plugged in and he types away like he's doing something, but like that just seems like a little bit of set dressing that somebody there on the set should have caught. Just, you know, FYI for next time Toei. But he does have some sort of plan, so we see how he implements that in this episode. We see Guton, the Gekitotsu robot's Bugster, come into fruition here from a patient by the name of Mai. Now she's learning Japanese traditional dance, she has a performance coming up, and anxiety over the performance is what's giving the Bugster strength. Now, as we're seeing again, the Bugsters seem to have evolved further. They've developed the ability to be seen through the game scope, you know, the little stethoscope device that the doctors have. Clearly, it's not the little wavy bacon lines anymore. We can see the full-on monster now. So now we're seeing that as they're growing, and we see here clearly that the monster is described as a level 30 monster, which is higher than we've seen before. They're becoming much more of a threat. Now, as much as I say they are growing as a threat, this one in particular is kind of funny because of the fact that even though this is a robot-based monster, he bothers to make his own robot noises, this whirring, even though we have the sound effects of that playing over these vocalized robotic hydraulic noises. And the thing about that makes me think back to something I've seen before is the movie Grandma's Boy, which came out in 2006, which, funny enough, was about a game company trying to develop a new game, and the head of the company, who made his own robot noises, was a little bit full of himself, and you can kind of see where I'm coming from with this comparison. So since we have a new patient and a new Bugster to fight, we need the CR to go ahead and take care of this. The thing is, they're at less capacity than they normally are based off last episode. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. So Emu, right? So Emu has gone through some sort of a change here. We see that the M gamer portion of his personality has taken over. He's the one in charge now. The regular Hojo Emu, or Emu Hojo, depending on how you're phrasing the name there, is not present. It's not visible there in his personality. Not everybody seems to be aware of this though, Hiiro especially. Now Hiiro is having to grow as a result of this. Because he thinks of himself as the best doctor in the world, he realizes that he has to step up his game as far as both gaming is concerned, fighting the Bugsters, and also his bedside manner as a doctor. Now to go ahead and specify there, Emu is the one who's the person touting that I'm going to save your smile, I'm going to focus on the patients. Hiiro is aware of this and has heard this, but he's never the one to take it to heart. He's the one that says, oh, I don't get involved with my patients, that's just not something I do. But here he realizes Emu is in no position to do that. Yes, he's still very much capable of fighting as a Kamen Rider, but as far as a doctor goes, he's out. He's on the no-fly list. Now, as far as story and characterization is concerned, I very much like that this is the catalyst for Hiiro's growth, because Emu is on the no-fly list. He's the one who can't operate, can't do anything very well. As far as a doctor is concerned, Hiiro decides of his own volition, I'm going to rise above this. If he can do it, I can do it. That's going to be my motivation for getting better, and the thing is, that's going to grow him as a character overall. Now, as far as the fights are concerned, Emu can still fight, because the gamer portion of him is basically the one doing those fights up until recently with Mighty Brothers XX. Now, the thing to see here is something that I've been waiting for, and usually this happens at a certain point in every Rider series, where that if there's an extended transformation sequence, we see it shortened significantly for the purpose of growing the story. Here we see at the very beginning, he goes straight to level 3, and then later on straight to level 2 as Exade. This is probably going to be the norm as well from now on in the series, because they're focusing so much on telling the story. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this Bugster that we're fighting in this episode is much stronger than Emu is in his current form. This Bugster, level 30, Emu and Gekitotsu Robots, level 3. There's a very large gap there. However, Emu sees that there's a way to overcome that gap by use of the power-up items there around the area. Now, what's great to see about that is the payoff later when Hiiro realizes that for the first time I can actually use the power-up items in this area to help me overcome the Bugster. We see later on in the episode that Hiiro has learned from watching Emu, because later on when he's fighting Genmu and this new Bugster, he manages to do some of his own stunts and draw the Bugster away into a position where he can knock him into the Confuse power-up and actually use the area against him. That means Hiiro is finally learning how to play the game. And props to the stunt department for letting him do some of his own stunts. Granted, he's probably not doing the wall flip that you see there, but he is clearly on the second story there running across the ledge. That's Hiiro's actor there, so props on you for doing your own stunt. But of course, this is all building up to the reveal that Hiiro is going to get this power-up that Genmu has created, the level 50 dual Gashot, which we will be using with the power of Tattletal Fantasy. Now, initially we see that the power of Tattletal Fantasy is a little bit too much for Hiiro to respond to, and Genmu revels in this. Now, it's interesting how he phrases it here. You're only used to a level 5 Gashot, there's no way you could handle this power being at level 50. The way that comes across, to me at least, is that he thinks of him as a person as only being level 5, and he is so much more since he invented this Gashot. This is his power, this is his, his crowning achievement thus far until he gets Kamen Rider Chronicle created. But the thing about it is, that makes sense for Kuroto-dan as a bad guy. He thinks of himself as being much higher than the people around him. Hiiro, though, decides to prove him wrong. Once he does manage to overcome this darkness that the Gashot contains, we see even more of this growth of him as a character, that he decides, of my own will, I'm going to rise up, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to claim that title of best doctor in the world by beating you. And now he's got this access to all of these other new powers that he didn't previously have with his Tattle Quest Gashot. So we see in short order that he has the capability of commanding Bugster minions, he has telekinesis, he has shield capabilities, and of course this drill cape, which is really friggin' sweet. I love drill capes whenever they use those, but that's besides the point here. It's the fact that these new powers don't rely on any sort of weapon, and I appreciate it so much more when a writer can just rely on power. Now granted, most of this is CG, but the fact that he ends up finishing this fight with Genmu and the Bugster with a rider kick that hits both of them is very much appreciated. But we see here that he's having to focus more on attacks that don't require the use of his sword. Now granted, even though Genmu has it and tells him, I'm going to use this against you, Hiiro proclaims, that's my scalpel, I'm taking it back. See, it's personal for him here, and that's what drives the story forward. The fact that there's a weight to it, that he's not just fighting for fighting's sake, he's not just fighting for the basic setup of saving a patient, it means something to him. And because of that, I, as a, somebody watching the show, can be more invested in the story. And at the end of this, we see that there was a success. Hiiro got back his Tattle Quest Gashot, he got back the Drago Knight Hunter Z Gashot, and Emu has finally regained his senses. He can go about being a doctor again. This does come at a price though, since Hiiro seems to be not quite used to this power, this level 50 Gashot. We'll see how that plays out over the next couple of episodes. The other interesting thing to see is that this episode saw a couple of characters sidelined here. We didn't see very much of Taiga or Saibaniko, even though we do have a theory from Saibaniko stating that, well, if the gamer portion of Emu was the one that beat me, then he wasn't really the one that beat me, right? But of course, Taiga doesn't want to buy into this, he's got his own motivations. More surprisingly though, Palat set out the entire episode just the very end where he has that last dialogue. Welcome back, Emu. He's expecting that fight that he's hoping for out of Emu later on down the line in the series. But these characters had to sit out to tell the rest of the story. I think that was a good decision. The reason being, if you focus too much on one or two characters and the rest get sidelined, you can have a very weak story overall. And the thing about it is, when you have a larger cast of characters, it's hard to find that balance. It really is. But the thing about it is, this series is taking that time to spend on one person in particular to grow them. Now, up to this point, I think we've had a lot of growth bit by bit with Taiga, but Hiiro really needed this growth right here. We needed to see him step up as a character, not just in power, but as a character, and this series shows that they're caring for each of their characters individually. That will serve them very well in the long run. And yeah, yet again, we have the theme at the end of the episode, just like we've been seeing for the last month now. But the thing about it is, we have to start realizing what they're doing here. They're spending every last second that they have during the Sunday morning block for telling story. When the episode started, the opening bumper didn't even finish loading before we started hearing the recap. And at the end, we see that Pollard's line goes into the ending "See you next game" bumper. They are spending every last second they've got to telling story, and I'm glad to see that they must have that much story to tell every week. So for that reason, I'm not as mad. I still very much want to hear the theme Excite every week, but if they're focused on telling the story, this is way better than what we had last year comparatively with Ghost, so I'm actually starting to be very okay with this. Now, of course, we got Hiiro's power-up this week. Next week's episode, we'll see the arrival of Snipe's level 50 form, which is the Bang Bang simulation form, which will see him basically turn into a giant battleship. But we'll also see Emu's hesitation as far as staying a common writer and not wanting that Bugster portion of him to take over, so that's a lot to look forward to. But you guys tell me what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Do you think that this focus on Hiiro this episode was warranted, that he needed this, or do you think we should have just kept him stoic and not very well developed? What do you think of the Bugster inside Emu? Do you think it'll be a little bit longer before we see it, or will they just play it off like nothing ever happened? And what do you think about this level gap that we're starting to see between the common writers and the monsters? Do you think that will play a bigger part, or will that just get blown over with the next power-up? You tell me. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 19 of Exade Replay for episode 19 of the series, A Sudden Fantasy. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.